So, thank you very much for your patience. I just realized that I put the wrong year. Yeah, I'm already ahead, 2025. So, well, thank you everyone for being here. My name is Lucia Vasquez, and I'm in the Office of Research and Sponsor Programs. And also, Carissa Craven contributed to the preparation of this presentation. Carissa is the program coordinator in our office. So let's start first with a very brief outline, kind of indicating, we're going to start with who needs to complete the RNUA. If you don't fall under the categories that we're going to mention, then you will be lucky and could leave this session. You won't have to stay. But after that, we're going to talk more about what the RNUA is. We're going to give some examples. We're going to kind of highlight why it is important to complete this disclosure. And we're going to kind of briefly show some statements and updates on this policy. And we're going to end the presentation by showing an example of how to complete the disclosure. So here is a list of people who need to complete this disclosure. And you can see it is academic professionals, faculty, whether you're tenure or untenure, instructors, adjuncts, and also, as you can see in blue on the right-hand side, individuals with 0% unpaid appointments also will need to do that. So, and at any point, please feel free to ask any questions. Okay, so first, let's talk about what is this process. And the RNUA starts on a report of non-university activities. And these non-university activities, you also will hear me refer to them as outside activities. So we're going to use interchangeably these terms. So this process is a process where faculty and all academic professionals need to actually disclose and obtain approval for any outside activities. And we'll get into more detail in a minute. So this requirement also relates to this policy on conflict of commitment and conflict of interest. And let's talk about what is the conflict of commitment. So conflict of commitment is, as we know, we are expected to do basically our jobs. And there are some activities that if we engage with them, they might be so demanding of our time, they might interfere with our responsibilities. For example, if I decide to teach the Lincoln Line Community College, and I'm teaching, let's say, 2 or 3 courses there, that it will be so much that it might interfere with my job here. Like 3 courses is almost a full-time. It will be like having 2 full-time jobs. So, and something as you will see later, that this policy acknowledges that sometimes we engage in activities that are good for us, for our professional development, or for the university, but we'll see that we have to report them, and we'll see later there are ways of making sure that we can do it in a reasonable way with a reasonable amount of time. Anyway, so that's conflict of commitment. Now let's talk about conflict of interest. Here you can see the law, the definition, and the information. So if we are put in a position where we can influence either directly or indirectly some kind of university business or research, and we're going to do it in a way that leads to a gain to the academic staff member, that or to the, as you can see here, our immediate family member, which we will define in a minute, that could not be beneficial for the university. And I'm going to give you another example, conflict of interest. For example, let's say, as most of you know me, I'm of Mexican ancestry. And let us assume that my sister has a business, has a Mexican restaurant, and we decide that now we're gonna supply all the cafeteria with that from food from my sister's business, that would be a conflict of interest because in this case, I'm an immediately family member, in this case, my sister, could be engaged in this vendor relationship. So, and it could be either perceived or directly be a conflict of interest. We can see there are other all kinds of ways to ensure that the conflict of commitments are managed or eliminated. So here are some examples of the required disclosure that require us to complete this report. So if we're engaged in some kind of a consulting activity, let's say I am now higher education consultant for private institutions, I will have to report that. Or maybe I have a financial interest in a company, then also have to report that. As I mentioned before, if I'm teaching at another institution, I will need to disclose that. Or maybe you have a fiduciary role in an organization, or you're owning your own company, maybe doing some freelance work, maybe managing a rental property. And of course, these are examples, it's not an exhaustive list. But again, I mean, we acknowledge that some of these activities may be of benefit to you, to the university. We'll see later how we can manage them. And then in some cases, kind of usually extreme and rare cases, they need to be eliminated. Here are some examples of activities that don't require disclosing in general, unless you're spending a lot of time with them, but in general, that don't require disclosure. Like if you're working on your research and then preparing your publications, so that's okay. Or you're participating in professional conferences. Or maybe you're part of a review panel, like for example, maybe you're reviewing grant proposals for an organization such as the National Science Foundation. So in that case, that type of activity is okay. Or you are kind of reviewing in in journals that are peer reviewed. Some of you are a reviewer, so that's okay. And even like if you are earning income from your savings account or mutual fund, that is okay. And again, here, this is not an exhaustive list. That's a kind of the disclosure. Now, basically what we're trying to, with this training, kind of get the message is that all these outside activities can benefit all of us, all the academic members. They can enhance our skills, and in many cases can be beneficial to the university or to the community. And when we engage in some of these activities, we need to make sure that they're not affecting our university responsibilities, and they're not incompatible with the university mission. You know, we have in our mission and vision the goals of education. We need to make sure that they align with those missions of the university. They don't divert funds or resources to other opportunities. Like for example, if I decide to, let's say I have a company and I'm conducting meetings with potential investors using classrooms at UIS, that would be a prohibited activity. That should be diverting resources. Yes.
Like university fund or resources. Say, I'm using the university fund from here for research, writing a research paper, and another person is my co-author from other universities. So, is it okay?
Yeah. Here the question is whether like a faculty here is collaborating with someone and they use university resources. Yes, because it relates to your academic work. So in that case, I said you have an external collaborator, but you're working on your academic research.
So I have to report it?
No, you don't have to report it. That's is within your academic responsibilities. So that is fine. So And here also use of funds or resources, like for example, again, using, let's say somebody who is engaged in a political campaign and starts printing flyers with university resources, that's something that should not be done. I mean, it's would be basically using university resources without approval. And any other activity that might diminish or kind of block the goals of our institution should not be conducted. So this kind of relates to a couple of statements we're going to talk about. COCI refers to conflicts of commitment and interest. And so I think the university as a whole acknowledges that sometimes this either actual, potential, or perceived conflicts or commitments could happen, but I think as long as they're disclosed, we're okay with that, and as I said earlier, we can find ways of managing a perceived or a potential conflict of commitment. We acknowledge also, as I said before, that participating in activities, or what we call it outside activities, could be beneficial for the faculty member, enhancing skills, or could benefit the university or the community. So that is fine to engage in those external activities as long as they are not incompatible with the university's vision, which we talked about before. And basically here, continuing with the policy, is as long as we are using the resources, our time, and our effort in a way that is consistent with the university goals, we're okay with that. Something interesting, something that I want to highlight is that we have to disclose all those outside activities, and we require prior approval before conducting them. For example, let's say if I want to start a company, and I have my plan to do so, it is okay, but I have to report it. And I have to obtain approval from my supervisor. Say, for example, I could say, I'm gonna be devoting 5 hours per week to the creation of a new company. That's okay, but I need to obtain prior approval. The UEO is an abbreviation for Unit Executive Officer, and that could be your department chair, your school director, whoever is in that position that is kind of in a supervisory role, if you will. So as you can see, cover individuals, and we'll go to that position, in a minute. All of us are required to disclose. The cover individuals is a list that I show you at the beginning. Remember when I said who needs to disclose? Those are considered the cover individuals. And basically all the academic professionals, the faculty are required to disclose. But also we need to keep in mind that our immediate family members also need to do so when we complete that report. And here, for example, again, let us assume that my sister, as I was telling you, my sister has a business that plans to engage and provides food for the cafeteria. So in that case, or that she's engaged in that kind of activity, I will have to disclose it because she's an immediate family member. And again, I need to disclose that, and my supervisor will have to review it and approve it, require changes, or require me to develop a management plan that we'll talk about in a minute. So something very brief that I want to mention is that they're having some updates to the policy. And here are some of just kind of the main changes. And it's basically, I'm not going to go into detail of explaining each of them, and you can have access to these slides later. But the main changes have been to provide more clarity in different topics throughout the policy. For example, explaining, okay, who are we consider cover individuals who need to report these outside activities, and also explaining a little bit in more detail what do we mean by outside activities. Also by defining who do we consider like immediate immediate family members, and what are kind of our university responsibilities. So this is a reference table. So here are like the links to the policy. You can also, it's available, as you can see, in two formats, as a web page or as a PDF. There is also another area about financial conflict of interest. And as you can see here, that also it applies to certain cases involving research. But for this case, we're focusing only on the COCI policy. So you can refer to this, basically to this policy if you need kind of additional information. So we need, in terms of when we need to report this, is every year, usually during September, we need to file this disclosure. Here is a link to the place where you can access the disclosure form. And we have a kind of a timetable. Something here to kind of keep in mind is that October 7th is the submission deadline for all of us. And then our supervisors will review, and the deadline for them is October 28th. In some cases, where there might be potential or perceived conflict of interest that was not resolved by your supervisor, then it will need what is called a second level of review, and is the supervisor of your supervisor will need to review it. For example, if your supervisor, or your immediate unit executive officer is a department chair, that will be your unit level review. But if it escalates to the next level, that will be the dean. The dean will need to review your report. Now, the other question that we get is whether there are any other times when you need to file this disclosure. And you can see here, like if you are newly hired, as I know that some of you have just been newly hired, you need to do that. And if you are transferring to another unit, like for example, I am the provost office, but let's say if I move to the College of Health Science and Technology, then I will be transferring to a different unit and I will have to complete the disclosure. And other cases is that if I am engaging, for example, let's say that I complete my disclosure in the month of September, but then in December, that's when I decide to start a company. Then at that point, because I'm now be engaged or planning to engage in an outside activity, I will have to, again, complete this report and request approval. Or when any other change occurs in terms of your involvement with outside activities, that's when you need to file this report. And in some cases, if you are being funded by a granting agency, sometimes they may require you to complete this type of report. There are cases where there are exceptions to this filing, which are called temporary releases. Like, for example, if somebody of this academic staff member is on medical leave or an unpaid leave, then the unit executive officer, that is your department chair or school director, may grant kind of an exception of what they call a temporary release. But when that person comes back to work with us, then that it needs to complete that filing. And like here, another example, if this staff member also engages in some kind of activities that were not approved, then again, must complete this disclosure. And I can see this, in this case, our supervisors may not grant a release if we continue to conduct or doing this external activity without approval. And something here is kind of interesting to keep in mind is that unit executive officer could revoke the release at any time. Okay, so what is it important to go through all this process of disclosing what we're doing outside of our university work? Well, as you know, it's okay. As you know, the university obtains federal grants, and we are constantly being kind of reviewed by these federal agencies in terms of to making sure that all faculty and all the academic staff are fulfilling their activities. So, and also just to make sure that we're on the right track, that we're like as it says here on the slide, just making sure that whatever faculty are engaging in and all their academic staff doesn't represent a conflict, whether it's real or perceived. All right, so now let's kind of jump to the practical part. We kind of give all the theoretical part of the presentation, and here's the theoretical part. If you are on a computer and you want to complete your RNUA now, you can do so by just going to the site. You'll see a page that looks like this. You have to enter your net ID and your password, and then you'll see something says starts a new disclosure. So you will click there, and then you'll be taken to a screen. If you have engaged in some kind of activities in the previous year, you will need to complete some information about the time you entered last year when you declared. Like, for example, if I said that I was going to be teaching a course at Lincoln Land last year, and I said there was going to be doing it for about 5 hours per week, but it turns out there was like 7 hours, I will need to enter that information in the area that's retrospective time. So something here to keep in mind when we report, it says a day is based on typical day. So it used to be defined as 8 hours, but as we know, many of us, our work day is not 8 hours, could be a little more. So I just kind of think about what is your typical day. Here also, as you continue with the filing of your disclosure, you'll get a list. And here, just kind of, here will answer this question. You have activities of financial interest to disclose, and here kind of gives you a list. And it says, as you can see, your non-University of Illinois activities and financial interest, and those of your immediate family include, but are not limited to, and here are some examples I mentioned before: teaching, you are teaching another institution, you have an affiliation maybe with another organization, maybe you are doing research, and then some kind of institute doing consulting. Anyway, so here is the list. And of course, it's not an extensive list, but if you're not doing any of that, if you're just kind of doing your U of I or your UIS work, then in this case, you would click no. But if you do, then you have to click yes. And also, you need to report, if you say yes, and then, sorry, if you have like any sponsor travel, you also need to answer this question. And again, it's a yes or no type of answer. So here, like, for example, in my case, I don't have anything else to disclose, so I would check no. And same thing here for the past months. Nobody has kind of sponsored my travel and the amount of $5,000 or more. So I will, in this case, say no. And when you don't have anything to declare, it's just like a few clicks and you will be done with your reporting. However, when, well, let me just kind of go back here. If you have activities that you have engaged with, then you'll need to provide additional information. And we'll see that in the next screens. So you will start seeing that you will see another screen that shows the activities. So you need to select, for example, and this is an example. Let's say last year I was engaged in these different activities. I have 3 different companies. It shows what kind of financial interest with each of them. And in this case, I will need to kind of enter information about retrospective days. That is how many days I actually spent on each of those activities. And if I'm now engaging in something that is new, you will click here this button for the new activity. And if you need to change any of the information here, like you have the option of adding, or if you make a mistake, you can kind of delete that. Then, once you have selected that you were involved in some of non-university activities, you need to enter more information about that activity. For example, I engaged in an organization. I need to enter the name of the organization and also provide a description of what that organization does. For example, here, it says this company develops software, visualization, etc. So you have to include a brief description because that helps us understand the nature of the activity you are engaged with. Also, you need to indicate whether that organization is in the US or not. And you can see here, in this case, selected, yes, this organization is outside the United States. Give an example that is in Morocco. So you have to include that. And there are some additional pieces of information that you will need to provide. For example, here, are you covered under a contract, or is there an agreement between you and that foreign organization? And again, you can say yes or no. And if so, you can attach a contract or relevant information. You also need to indicate the level of financial interest, and here indicate whether kind of the characteristic of the entity that you are engaged with. As you can see here, you get different options, and also the financial interest. And you can see here, again, different levels of financial interest. And then you'll get a question on whether this organization conducts business with the U of I, or in the future, will they engage with the U of I in the coming year? Yes or no? And when you say yes, you can say, to the best of my knowledge, will the entity conduct business with your department? You can say, well, maybe yes. And then again, you can describe what kind of business. You also need to include here whether, here, look at this question. Does the individual family have ownership, interest, or income in excess of this amount? And again, you can say yes or no. And then there's a question about whether there is a use of university resources. So anyway, so if you are engaged in an external activity or an outside activity, you will be getting additional questions. And here we only kind of are showing some examples. It could be additional ones based on your responses. So after you answer these questions, your unit executive officer will determine whether it's a conflict of interest or not. If it's not, he would approve it, and you'll get the approval, and then you are done. But also, approval or not depends on a threshold, whether you get a significant threshold. Like, for example, I think usually it's $25,000, more than $25,000 requires additional scrutiny. And in some cases, you might be asked additional information. But let me just kind of here say again, the purpose of this policy is not to forbid any activity outside the university, but have a ways to have a record that exists, and then make sure that it's compliant with our policies, with our goals, and in most cases, if there is something that is a perceived or apparent conflict, there is a way of managing. You can develop a management plan. And some, as I said, I mean, in the 4 years of having in this position, there has been only one case where the activity was forbidden, but in most cases, there is a plan that is being developed to ensure that the faculty can conduct those outside activities. Now, another area that you will need to complete if you are engaged in a sponsor or reimbursed travel. And as I said, the threshold here is 5,000 or more. Then you have to kind of complete some additional questions there, such as the name of the sponsor. I mean, where do you go? All the details about the travel, purpose of the trip, etc. So, and then here we're kind of approaching the end. Your supervisor either approve or ask you to develop a conflict management plan. And once all of this is reviewed and certified, then you can submit. And that will be, you can see here the submit button. And that basically will be the end of your disclosure. As I said, in some cases, it requires a second level of review, but in most cases, it's very rare. So, I don't know. Are there any questions? I think we have only one person in Zoom. No, a couple of people in Zoom. And so, are there any questions?
Question like, want to give example that if anyone working here and also has 3 courses in the nearby community college,
Mm-hmm.
then you need to report. But if it is like part-time, say 1 course.
If it's here, the question is, if somebody's teaching 1 course somewhere else, yes, that needs to be reported. And then you will, as you report it, there will be a question asking how many days a week are you spending on this activity, and so you have to report it there. Yeah, and as I said, I think in general, 1 course, from what I have seen, 1 course doesn't seem to be a problem.
Sure.
No, not a problem. You have to report it, and in general,
Actually, any work we can do outside that we can earn money.
Yes, you need to report that. Like
any kind of work we do outside that earn money.
Yes. Yes. Like, for example, if I'm a consultant and I get $2,000 a month for being a consultant, I need to report that.
I mean, we need to report, but what is the possibility to be approved?
Well, it depends. It depends on the amount of time that you are devoting to that. And also it depends whether this outside activity doesn't conflict with what you are doing here at the university. So it depends on those factors. Are there any questions from the audience? I think there's one. Let's see. Okay, so thank you. Then there's no any other questions. All right, it seems like there are no more questions. Well, thank you everyone for being here. And if you have, as you start completing your disclosures, you have questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you, and thank you to Carissa for helping prepare this presentation.
Yeah.
Okay, bye-bye. Thank you.